Welcome to Calm Your Crazy. I'm Kiana Lambert, and tonight we're going to be talking about, well, what else? Reality as I am learning to understand it. And I'm very obsessed with this topic because I always got sad at the end of every movie because it was over. And I'm like a perpetual student. I just love going and learning. And I went through college, and whenever I graduated with my master's, I was really sad because it was over, right? But then I started learning all kinds of other stuff. And reality is a never-ending puzzle that I always can find more to discover. And that is amazing for me and my brain because I like to learn new things all the time. And so when there's like a never-ending wealth of knowledge that I can find, it's like the rabbit hole never ends. And with somebody that has a really big, fast mind like mine, having a rabbit hole that never ends and having the constant realizations and surprises makes me happy. It creates the dopamine in my brain. So I'm obsessed with that topic, and we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to walk through the connection between quantum physics concepts like the observer effect. I know you guys probably know all this stuff already because I talk about it a lot, but we're going to talk about it as if you're new and never heard the show before. So concepts like the observer effect, electromagnetism, and entanglement, and how they show up in your everyday life through thought patterns, emotion states, and action. And we're going to break down reality again through consciousness, the nervous system, and your belief system. We're going to talk about reality as a mirror, micro versus macro systems, frequency, vibration, and perception, the role of the nervous system in shaping what you see, fear versus love as a polarity system. And a polarity system is just an opposite ends of the spectrum. So when I refer to polarity, it just means positive, negative, opposite ends of the spectrum. And we're going to talk about why belief and action are required to create change, how subconscious programming controls your outcomes. I'm going to connect physics, biology, lived experience, into an understanding of how to shift what you experience in your life. So the reason that this is so exciting for me is because it is a puzzle. Reality is a puzzle, and it corresponds to math, and it's something that I want to figure out. I did not have a very stable childhood, and I loved math because you could prove math. Math was correct whether it was forwards or backwards. And so when I'm trying to prove something, when I'm thinking of stuff, when I'm looking at reality and new data that comes out, I'm thinking of it in quantum terms, math terms, and then how everything works on a macro and micro scale. Because once you know the pattern of how nature creates things, like, you're good to go. You know how everything works. People get upset about the weather. You know it's just one huge wave going across the planet, and it creates all these little fluctuations that are huge because of climate change. And the whole planet is like this big gaseous ball where you have low temperatures and high temperatures and melting snow that's adding cold air, and you're making a planet that is undergoing a huge amount of change because of the waves that are so big. Pockets of huge amounts of cold air and then hot air, and then it makes a wave around the entire planet. And what the planet is trying to do is come back into balance and equilibrium where those waves are smaller and weather was more predictable and weather patterns were more predictable. Everything is always trying to go back to balance. So that's what's happening there. And that's a really good example of how you're always going to come back into balance, how everything comes back into balance. That's why you get used to things. That's why there's efficacy in drugs that changes, because you build up a tolerance, because your body is a system that's always going to go into equilibrium. And that your life is the same way. If you had a particularly challenging life in the beginning, you have the choice to go back into equilibrium and have a wonderful life to balance out the challenges that you had. And so reality for me is not just a never-ending mystery that I can uncover, but it's also has the answers to how you can live your life and control it. And people talk about, oh, well, you need to let go and you don't need to control this and that and the other. Well, that works for them. That's in their little observational reality. And my suspicion is they could never figure out how to control it, so they taught acceptance, which is fine. But that doesn't work for me, so we're just going to say no to that. And from what I know of quantum physics and the unified field and the observation of the experience, is that you get to choose whatever the F you want to. And if I accept that somebody's saying, oh, you just need to accept reality the way it is, then I am accepting their observation and their experience. And fuck a bunch of that shit. Excuse my French, but no, absolutely not. I refuse to accept anybody else's experience. I want to have my own. I want to know what I feel and know, and I want to create what I want to create. Just because you couldn't figure it out doesn't mean that somebody else can't. That's like saying, oh, all of Stephen Hawking's theories were correct and all Einstein's theories were correct and their mathematical equations were right on. And they've already disproven some of them, right? And then some of them have come full circle and been reproven again. So it's basically accepting somebody else's observation and their experience as proof of your life. And there's something inside me that rages to the machine when that comes up. So it's a big no for me. We're going to continue to go down this rabbit hole of how reality works. And the concepts are kind of big, heavy, and they are hard to wrap your mind around. So I try to make them as simple as possible and relate them to things on a micro scale or a macro scale, depending on how I explain it. So let's just get started. I'm rambling a little bit because my back is hurting. I pulled it trying to mess with my Aussie, who was not behaving herself, and I twisted just the right way and pulled it. So it is hurting like a son of a gun. But anyway, we're shifting to a reality where that's not going to be a problem. I do it all the time. Anyway, so let's start off with reality as a mirror. I've talked about this a lot, but reality mirrors your internal state, right? And everything is a micro to macrocosm on a scale. So we as consciousness create ourselves to mirror our consciousness through our perspective because we want to witness what we can create. And because we know we can do anything, we still want to see it and feel it and create it and savor it. And just imagine if you were the consciousness that you are. You can do anything you want to do. There's no time, so everything happens in a split second, and you can create all possibilities, all probabilities, all timelines, all realities. What would you do? And there's just you. How would you live? And I'm asking, from human to human. We can only grasp a certain amount with our human brains. So as a human with our emotions, if we had all that ability but we were completely alone, what would you do? You would create this. You would create every single possibility, and you would want to figure it out, and you'd want to feel it and have something to do. So we as consciousness create life, all life, to reflect our own ability back to ourselves. And I say our, but it's one consciousness. And it goes through all this, or we go through all this, so we can experience the evolution of becoming consciousness. Because everything is recursive. So while consciousness creates everything to experience itself, we evolve to also become consciousness through everything that we experience ourselves. Because everything is a micro scale to a macro scale. So I hope that makes sense, but you are evolving to become consciousness. And consciousness already became and then split itself to remember itself, to interact with itself. And it doesn't make sense when you say it that way. but it's literally, think of it as a quantum computer. It's running through every single scenario, every single timeline, every single algorithm to figure out what exactly can be done, what predictions and outcomes it can have. I hate referring to it as a quantum computer, because what we have as a quantum computer does not do it justice, and it kind of diminishes what it is. And it's far more amazing and beautiful and magical than just calling it a quantum computer, especially the way they look now. So I don't like to refer to it as that, but it can help with some of the imagination, because we associate a lot of things with algorithms now, because that's part of what we're experiencing. So that's basically what's happening. It's an algorithmic quantum computer that's creating simulations so that it can play out all the simulations and experience them. So this is how we create reality for ourselves, because of the simulation, and we create it on a micro scale. And we reflect back to ourselves the same way, because reality is created by our internal state. So everything acts like a mirror, and everything is like a Russian nesting doll, with the big Russian nesting doll being one end of the spectrum and the small nesting doll being on the other end. And so everything is just a copy of itself in nature, and we're no different. So consciousness is on one end of the spectrum, and we humans are the other end, with everything in between. So we evolve into consciousness, and then consciousness also created us. So you can think of it as consciousness being on one end of the spectrum and then humans on the other. And since everything folds back on itself, it's recursive. This is what you see as time. And this is what Einstein was seeing, and not a wormhole, but quantum tunneling. And this is why he asserted that we could travel in time as humans, because he was seeing reality without time. Because if the equation that he came up with showed past travel, what do we know about math? If it can go backwards, it can go forwards. So this is what he was seeing. He was seeing quantum tunneling and quantum entanglement. And this also shows how the same photon or electron is the same exact one creating everything we see, just at a different frequency. And that is recursion of the spectrum, and allows everything to exist at the same time. And I know that was a lot right there. But just imagine the same photon, which is a photon is light, vibrating at so many different rates and frequencies that it creates everything you see. And interestingly enough, they just discovered that there are 48 dimensions in a photon, and they spiral up. So each spiral is a dimension. Well, if it's the same photon that is recurring everywhere in everything we see, then all the information of where that photon is located inside of it. So if it has 48 dimensions located inside of it, that means that there are only 48 dimensions where we can see light, where the spectrum is light based, where the spectrum is what we see and what a photon creates in that spectrum. So there's only 48 dimensions that humans have evolved into so far. 48. And of those, each of those 48, there are every single possibility and every single probability that can ever happen or will happen in that dimension, housed in that dimension. And I started to think, of course I'm thinking with a human mind, right? But like, what could be outside those 48 dimensions? Because there is infinite number of dimensions, but I started thinking about like what could be outside of those 48 dimensions. And I can't conceive of it. Do you know why? Because my human eyes and my association is only with a photon. So anything I saw outside those 48 dimensions would also require light for me to see. Therefore, it would be part of the photon. Therefore, there is no reality for me to see with my human eyes at a human scale outside those 48 dimensions. Now, there is infinite number of dimensions backwards and forwards, right? But they're not made with photons and they're not made with light. So that's a mind boggler for you. But I thought that was very cool whenever it came out. Anyway, consciousness, light, again, is one polarity and humans are the other. And the distance between them is frequency, vibration, and dimension. So of those 48 dimensions, you can think of that as right in the middle, and then there are infinite number of dimensions all around it that do not have anything to do with light, and all that is still housed in consciousness. But as far as this spectrum that I'm speaking of, we are evolving to be consciousness, and consciousness created us, so that's one end of the spectrum, and humans are on the other. And you can think of the universe as one gigantic torus field of electromagnetism. And this is how everything is created. It's 99.99% of what we cannot see. So this is the unified field of potential energy where we, as the observers, collapse the wave of that potential energy into an outcome. And this outcome is our torus field. That's what we see, that's what we travel in, is our own electromagnetic torus field that we are creating what we see. And if you zoomed out, you would see that all life forms that ever existed and will ever exist, with all the possible realities, playing out at once. All these waves of electromagnetism collapsing into all life forms, all realities. And it's just playing itself out. It's playing every single possibility out. It's a simulation. And everything in it is a mirror. And everything is a macro to microcosm with a spectrum in between of frequency, vibration, and dimension. And it goes on forever. Forever and ever and ever. Like an infinite set of rushing nesting dolls. You can also look at it as a never-ending electromagnetic spectrum, or the flower of life, because it's all representing the same structure. So everything is consciousness moving through a spectrum, and humans evolve into other life forms depending on the realities they experience. So different environments create different outcomes. So for an example is, in one lifetime of humanity, a comet was coming, and they went underground, and they started evolving underground, and they became the ant people. I know it sounds crazy, but when you look at evolution, how everything goes on a spectrum, you can see how every single simulation has to play the probability and possibility out. So humankind was reset so many times, and as soon as they reached a different level of frequency and went into another dimension, it's still here right on top of us. We just don't interact with it because it's vibrating at a different rate. But every single humanity story arc chose a different path. So ours right now is science. We're going the robotics way and the science way and Neuralink and all this machinery way. Whereas before they had sound, they had different things, and they could fly and travel with sound. So their story arc was completely different. And their evolution went a different way. And here's where it gets fun, is that you had the ant people, and then you have different humans that evolved into different alien species based on the star system that they traveled to. So everything that we think of, everything that we have access to has already been done, because there's no time in physics. But if you did experience it as time, you would have seen the evolution of one humanity path going into this way, and then one going into a different way. So humans are the end point and the beginning point. We started every single alien civilization that there is. Every single one that you can think of. People think of the Lyrans or the Pleiades and all of them. It's because those are star systems that have humanoids that advanced from human civilization into those aliens. And then they come back and they reseed the planet in their game, because the game never ends. The simulation never ends. So they go into different dimensions, but they can also see and interact with ours because it's below theirs, and they understand that they've evolved from that, and they understand how all the realities and universes work together. So they travel and they seed and they play because their sandbox is bigger than ours. So we have a sandbox that's a given set of rules that we make collectively, and then the sandbox gets bigger and bigger and bigger the more dimensional you go, because you have more access to more information. So every human experiences their own reality as well, because everything that happens on a macro scale happens on a micro scale. So I say humanity evolved into these different alien species, but humans have their own micro reality too, where they can evolve however they want to in the life that they have. So this is part of reality and how it's based and how you create it on a micro scale. And you choose which reality you experience based on your direction, your focus, and your internal state. And there is divergence, which means if you go left, there is a you that goes right, and both realities exist. And for every single decision you make, there's an opposite decision that's created as well. And so you are constantly shifting realities with every choice that you make, because they all exist at the same time. So when you want to create something in your life, that's also called manifestation, right? And that applies if you want money or anything. You have to walk towards it. You have to take action and move in the direction you believe that you can get there based on what inspires you. So move in the direction you believe that you can get there means that what parameters do you believe are around what you can get. And there are no wrong answers. If you believe you can only get it this one way because this is how you believe reality works, that's the only way you're going to get it. So the challenge is to understand that you're consciousness creating everything, and you can decide what outcome you want, and you can decide what you want to have, and then expect it, because it's already been done. It's already done. There's no time. So as soon as you choose that outcome, it's already done. The crux is if you believe it, because you have internal subconscious programming that you have to overwrite, and it can take some time for you to believe that you are the conscious creator of your reality. So it may take time, because you're going to have to control your thoughts. You're going to have to rewire your subconscious programming that says you can only get what you want if you do it a certain way. And then you also have to stay in the frequency that matches the outcome that you want, because you create reality based on emotional frequency, because consciousness split into everything so that it could savor the moment, so it could feel it, right? Because if you're up there and you can create everything and you're by yourself, you're not feeling anything. So it only makes sense if we're coming down here to feel that that's how reality is created, through our frequency of emotions, right? I mean, we didn't come down here to see stuff. I mean, we can watch movies and it doesn't really mean that we're in it. It doesn't mean that we're experiencing it. So we want to experience it as consciousness. And therefore, that's how reality is made, through your frequency of emotion, because that's what you want to feel, and reality is going to reflect you. So if you're feeling bad, it's going to mirror that and give you more situations to feel bad, and the same with good. So you have to choose that frequency of emotion that you want in order for it to come to you. And it's hard to do that if you don't know what love feels like for you. And it's hard to do that if you don't know what happiness feels like. But I swear you do. It's in there somewhere. When you imagine what you're doing and what you want to do and feeling peace and love and safety, you can imagine what happiness feels like. It may not be something you've ever felt before, so it's going to feel weird. But you can hold that. It's just not going to feel comfortable at first because your nervous system isn't used to it. If you come from some part of your life where fear was always part of the equation, which most people have, our parents made us believe in so much fear so that we wouldn't go past or hurt ourselves or do anything dangerous. But also that's a double-edged sword. So while it kept us safe in the short term, it kept us stagnant and collapsed and shrunk in the long term, because fear creates anxiety and it creates all this pressure and it siphons the energy. So it really inhibits us in the long term from creating the reality we want. So fear is one end of the spectrum, and then love is on the other side. So the more that you face your fear, the more that you move towards love. And it's not love for anybody else, it's love for yourself. It's the feel good about yourself. And this is what everybody is walking towards in their entire human life. Because it doesn't matter what the external happens in the external. You can have all the money in the world, be important, and be on the cover of Fortune 500. But if you do not have a connection with yourself and you're only creating dopamine from the external environment, what happens to everything in nature? You build up a tolerance. Balance is always coming into balance, and balance is just tolerance. Balance is the lowered efficacy of a drug. So everything gets metabolized, and if you're only relying on the external world to help you feel good, then you're missing walking towards yourself, because there's a never-ending pool of energy in that love that you feel when you are connected with it and you face your fears and you change your nervous system and you change your reality. And when you start to feel safe and you want to start doing things and getting out more, that's taking action. Changing your thoughts is taking action. Changing your emotional state is taking action. So all of that requires you to change something about yourself, and that may be something that brings up a lot of fear. And it's just your nervous system reacting to something that it's never experienced before. And when you continue to walk despite the fear, your nervous system sees that there is nothing that it's going to kill it, and it metabolizes that fear. Balance comes back into play. Everything is balanced again. You build up a tolerance to fear. And it's just like everything else. It's just your nervous system. It learns there's no danger. You metabolize the fear, you shift your frequency just like that. And it doesn't take any time at all. You are literally shifting into a different reality immediately. And your reality, when you sustain this state, will reflect it and stay in place. So, I talked about how everything is parameters, right? So you have your subconscious programming that creates parameters, and those are your belief system about how you can get things that you want. So I'm going to talk about 2 ways that you can redo this, okay? So there are 2 ways that I talk about to move toward what you want, and one is the structured path. So when you want to manifest something, you can create a structured path that says, I'm going to journal, I'm going to define what I want, or I'm going to think about it and define what I want. I want this. Let me research how to get there. So you go out, you research how to do it, and then you execute the actions, and you're taking steps every time, and then you do it. We were going to move to Saudi Arabia and live as expats for a while because my husband got a contract with one of the colleges over there. And we wanted to travel and do different things and experience life in a different way. So he decided this was he researched, 6-figure jobs or whatever in different countries, and Then we researched how much it would take to save and do this and that with the money. And then we started researching jobs, and then he found a job, and then we got all the paperwork together. That is a structured path. I want this, let me research how to get there. You gather the options and you try them and you move forward. And that's the way that most people do it. And that's a fine, totally fine way to do it. But then there's the open path. And this is the one where there's no definitions. You trust yourself that you're going to get where you want to go. You know where you want to go. You know what you want to experience. You trust yourself that you know what to do in the moment that it happens, and you're going to be aware, and you're going to follow the signs. You're going to move, and you're going to let things unfold. So both of these paths work, and both will get you to the end. The difference in these two paths is how your nervous system responds. Okay? So in the structured path, your nervous system, if you are used to the external world and this is how you want to function and operate, is this makes you feel safer, you define it, you research it, you look at all the other people who've accomplished what you want to accomplish, and then you start moving forward. Your nervous system has all this evidence that it sees. And it says, oh, okay, this is definitely possible, that affects your belief system, boom, the door's open, you're the observer, the outcome you want collapses your wave, and you get what you want. The open path requires trust. And trust can be hard for a nervous system that's challenging or has had challenges. So you don't really know. You don't know how you're going to get there. You're just going to take a step at a time. You're going to trust yourself. You're going to move and know that everything is happening for you, not to you. And that might be hard for your nervous system. But it's definitely the more fun way. Because if you know that you're creating everything and you do the structured path, it's kind of like you already know the ending. You're still going to have the challenges back and forth that you create for yourself on that structured path, but it's going to be pretty straightforward. And I could say this from like every single thing that I've done has been the structured path, and I've always completed it. I went to school and I got my degree. I went to school again, I got another degree. I went to school again, I got another degree. I went to YouTube University and flipped a few houses. Every time I wanted to do something, I just research it and do it. I want to build a self-sustaining, eco-friendly house that is completely off the grid with sustainable water filtration and heat and solar and all that good stuff. And so I researched magnetic batteries, and I researched how solar interacts with the batteries, and I researched how to create your own battery. And my problem with that sidebar is just, the amount of electromagnetic energy that gives off of it and the housing for it. There's a lot of things to work out. But that's the structured path for me, and that's how I've always done it. And A always equals B, and I always get the outcome. But at this point in my life, I really am thinking the open path is a lot more fun, because I don't really want to be in a position where I don't trust myself. Like this latter half of my life is going to be totally open trust and trusting the magic, because I want to experience that. I've already experienced the structured way of making reality, and I want the magical part now. So I let things unfold. I follow the signs, and it's a lot more non-physical, and it feels so much better. But my nervous system also pipes up every now and again and is like a little nervous about how this is going to all work, So, those are the two ways. Now, the nervous system responds to both of them, but here's how it affects both of them, okay? If your nervous system is overwhelmed, it scans for danger, and this narrows your awareness. You can't see your options, and you can't see the synchronicities and the patterns, because your energy is not going to creating. It's going towards protection. Your nervous system is scanning, taking in data constantly to try to see what's wrong. So if you're calm, your awareness expands. You can see more. You can choose the better option. And you can access more information, because your nervous system is your gateway to your consciousness and your energy. When it's calm, you have access to everything. When it's not, it's constricted, and the energy coming into your torus field is also constricted, and your torus field shrinks into fear, and that's what you have. So your frequency matches what you see. If you're in anger, you're going to see anger. If you're in fear, you're going to see fear. And if you're in trust, you're going to see opportunity. And then the things that stand out are going to be the ones that are vibrating with your resonance. And so this is why you miss signs when you're stressed and you see patterns when you're calm. So reality behaves like a magnet. If you believe, you attract. If you don't believe, it's resistance. If it's the same polarity, because it's mirroring you, you're pushing it away. When it's the opposite polarity, you attract. And that's why I like to go with the trust one, because the trust one makes you relax, and by definition, you have to be open and accepting. So that changes the polarity to an attraction one. So when you don't believe, you're actively pushing your own outcome away. You're resisting yourself. And again, that comes from the subconscious programming, even basic ones, okay? So subconscious programming is the sky's blue, people drive me crazy, there's love everywhere, or there's pain everywhere. What your dominant belief is the one that's always going to win out. And this is why you can't create what you want, even if you want to, because your deeper belief is going to override it. And that's your subconscious programming. It's that ingrained deep belief. But you can reprogram that and rewire that with action, because you're showing that people don't drive you crazy. Because at the same time as you're taking action, you're shifting your thoughts that people are loving and helpful and beautiful, and so are you. And so while you're taking action and thinking those thoughts, that's a reprogram. If you see pain everywhere, and then you just tell yourself, no, I'm going to only see love everywhere from now on, and you start taking action and forcing that perception, eventually it will become the dominant one, and that dominant belief will win, and you will be in that reality all the time. And it's a rewiring that's a muscle. It takes repetition, it takes discipline, it takes evidence, and the evidence comes with your action. It takes self-awareness so that you can know what you're feeling, and it takes positive self-talk. You are the one that has to remind yourself of the proof. And the way that you do that, whenever you're having a moment where you need to provide yourself evidence and you don't have the action in place and you're feeling bad, you need to remind yourself of the proof of the times that you did have the evidence, that you did take action and things worked out. So when you take action, you're giving yourself new evidence for reprogramming. And on the times that you can't take action, you need to go back to the evidence that you have in your life that says, yes, I did this before, I can do it again. Because it works both ways. Your nervous system compiles all the negativity and compares it to your life right now, and then you're like, oh, this happened before, so it's going to happen again, and you have all this anxiety. Well, it works the other way too. Think about all the times that things went well for you, that things went good for you, that things were synchronous for you. And that's reprogramming. And then you take action and you start having better things happen to you because you're reprogramming at the same time. And you're creating new evidence. So that belief shrinks on the other side and starts to grow on the new side, so that you're reprogramming and putting in a new belief system. It's going to be hard for you to believe without action. I use this story all the time, but there was a woman who had a script she wrote, and it's been sitting in her top drawer for 11 years, and she's been manifesting by imagining it getting produced and people loving it, but she hasn't sent it out to anyone. She's expecting for it magically to just get into somebody's hands, and then she will have it produced and have all the outcomes that she's thinking of. And it's not going to happen if she doesn't take action and take that manuscript and do something with it. Because all the imagination is just creating a buildup of energy, But if you don't take action with it, there's nowhere for that energy to go. So she's never going to get that produced because she believes that it won't. Because her nervous system doesn't want to be rejected, so she's not going to take it out of her top drawer. And she's going to console herself with imagining how it's going to get produced and having the dopamine hit, and then she's never going to take it out of the drawer because it's too scary to get rejected if she sends it out there. And that's the crux. You got to deal with your nervous system. You have to confront the things that may leave you questioning, and you have to get over it anyway. So that's my spiel on reality. It kind of went all over the place, but it was just kind of examples of how the universe works on a big scale and how it works the same way for you on a micro scale. You are the observer, you collapse your wave, the wave comes from the unified field where all possibilities exist, and you decide what you want to experience through thoughts, emotions, belief, and action. And there's no time. There's no time in physics, so the moment that you decide and you move, everything gets going into motion for you to have the outcome you want. So the challenge for you is, what do you really want to experience, and which direction are you going to start walking? Because once you decide to move, it's already happening. So that was a little bit longer, and we kind of went in several different directions, but I did enjoy it. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I'll catch you next week.